Okay, so the number of people joining us seems to have settled a bit, and what I'll do is I'll start with the my little introduction and housekeeping bits, and then I'll hand over to Christine, and then we'll be able to get going in earnest. So my name's Nicholson Clasby. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the project manager for the Voice and Influence Partnership. I work for the Care Forum, and we lead the project. We also deliver its BME work, and we have organised this event jointly with the Avon Centre, whose representative here is Christine, and they deliver our multi-faith work. The other organisations in the Voice and Influence Partnership are Bristol Older People's Forum, who lead our work for older people, OTR, who deliver our LGBTQ+ work, and Wessel, who are our lead for disability. We also have some amazing advisory partners in Centre for Deaf and Hard of Hearing People, SARI, which is Stand Against Racism and Inequality, and VOSCA. And we came together as a partnership of organisations to help make sure that individuals, groups and communities whose voices aren't always heard are listened to and are part of shaping Bristol's future. So just a bit of housekeeping for tonight. The event is British Sign Language interpreted. You should be able to see the BSL interpreter on screen throughout. If you can't, you can pin them from your settings or message us in the chat and we'll aim to help you sort it out. As I've just said, the event is being recorded so we can share it more widely. As an audience member, you won't appear in the recording unless you choose to join us on screen during the Q&A to ask your question. So you can post your questions using the chat function at any point throughout tonight. And as I just said, if you'd like to ask your question in person, just mention that when you post, and when we get to your question, we'll bring you on screen and turn your video and camera and sound on, and you'll be able to join us that way. Otherwise, we'll read out your question on your behalf. You will be able to chat and respond to other audience members, comment and discuss. We just ask that everyone is respectful of others and appropriate in your responses and language. This is a public event and we reserve the right to moderate and manage responses to ensure that everyone can take part in a way that is appropriate and safe. So that's everything from me. I'm going to disappear and I'm going to hand you over to Christine.
Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to have you here and to participate in this event. My name's Christine. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the lead manager at the Avon Centre near Radstock. And Avon has had the honour of being the multi-faith partner of the Voice and Influence Partnership. And we're really thrilled to be having this seminar this evening, looking at the intersection between faith and racial justice. We have Ambrose Musiyiwa, who will be facilitating this evening, and then we have 4 panellists. I'm pleased to welcome Clive Lawton, Catherine Okoronkwo, Shiv and Zainab Mai-Bornu. It's really wonderful to have you all here and participating in this conversation. The way the evening will unfold is that everyone will introduce themselves, and then there will be a number of questions that are asked and the panelists will be asked to respond to them. And then those who are joining us who are not on screen, we would love to hear your questions and your comments about the conversation. So please do feel a part of it. Just at the beginning, as we start, I'd like to invite you just to say hello chat. The default is to directly to the panelists, but if you click against 2, you will also have the option of chatting to everyone. So if you would like to do that and just say who you are and if you belong to a faith community or another organisation, or you might just want to leave your name, however you feel comfortable. But a very warm welcome to you all. And I'm going to hand over to Ambrose. Thank you, Ambrose.
Thank you very much, Christine. And thank you everyone for attending. So the purpose of tonight's panel, like Christine said, is so that we look at what it means to be a person of faith and also what it means in relation to issues around racial justice. Why do these issues matter? We are in the middle of a pandemic that has highlighted the health inequalities that exist not only in the UK, but also around the world. And if we look at what is happening around almost all aspects of life, like in education, in health, in employment, unemployment, or in policing and the criminal justice system, we find that in Britain especially, there are issues around how inequalities are racialized, how racialized minorities are disadvantaged when they come into contact with the criminal justice system. So without more from me, we will go to our panelists, who are Reverend Catherine Okoronkwo, who is a writer and Church of England priest, and the racial justice advisor to the Bishop of Bristol. We've also got Shiv, who is chairperson of the Avon Indian Community Network and the South Gloucestershire Race Equality Network. Our third speaker is Zainab Mai-Bornu from Leicester University, where she was also an academic and has been involved in faith-related activities in Bristol and Bath. We've also got Clive Lawton, who is CEO of the Commonwealth Jewish Council and an internationally active education consultant, receiving his OBE in 2016 for services to education and the Jewish community. So on that note, we start with Catherine. Maybe if you could tell us from your perspective what you think it means to be a person of faith, and also how a person of faith should respond or can respond to issues around racial justice.
Good evening, everyone. It's just wonderful to be a part of this panel and this forum this evening. As you've heard, I'm Reverend Dr. Catherine Okoronkwo, and I'm actually based in Swindon, which is a part of Bristol Diocese. And as Ambrose has said, I'm also the Bishop of Bristol's Racial Justice Advisor. I believe it's really hard to have a faith and not to have a concern for justice for all people. There has been a real focus and energy within the Church of England to address systemic and structural racism within the church. So, for example, some of you might be aware that recently we had the Lament to Action Church of England report, which proposed a number of changes to begin bringing out the real radical change of culture in the life of the Church of England. And that report sets out about 47 specific action points for different arms of the church. So for example, some of the key priority areas are participation. How do we see people from minority ethnic backgrounds being represented at all levels of leadership and structures within the Church of England? It looks at governance, it looks at training, education, and indeed, of course, young people. And so in the Diocese of Bristol, we've begun that real difficult work of responding to this report. There's so much more that we can do, and we have a long way to go. But I'm hopeful that we can do better as a church, striving to live out that radical Christ love for the other. Because in my mind, as I always say in many of these sorts of contexts and forums, that until we can see the humanity in every single person, we lose something of ourselves. That is, we are less whole, we are less fulfilled, and we don't flourish fully and abundantly as the divine wants for us individually and collectively as a community. So that begins my presentation and my interest in this most important discourse. Thank you, Ambrose.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Clive, what is your take on what it means to be a person of faith, and also what it means in terms of responding to issues around racial justice?
Okay, well, I guess the first thing to say, and it sounds perhaps a bit odd, is I'm quite uncomfortable with the definition of myself as a person of faith. I think Jews don't talk very much about what they believe. Of course, it underpins what they do. And it seems to me that, you know, the faith thing is kind of neither here nor there unless it gets translated into doing something. And so I'm much more interested in what to do. Indubitably, I'm a Jew. For those of you who don't know, there's a pound on my head. But I'm a Jew. And most Jews in Britain, as probably everybody knows, are comparative recent immigrants. The vast majority of Jews arrived here 2-3 generations ago, beginning of the 20th century, escaping persecution. So I mean, it's not as if we don't know about discrimination and anti-Semitism. Others came later, escaping the Holocaust in Europe. And still others came more recently in the 40s, 50s, and 60s from the Middle East, escaping persecution in places like Iraq and Iran and Egypt and so forth. So the Jewish community is fully aware of what it's like to be at the sharp end of racism and anti-Jewish racism, which is called anti-Semitism. However, that doesn't, of course, mean to say, like anybody else, just because you suffer doesn't mean to say you're better at treating other people necessarily. And just recently, in fact, our national representative body called the Board of Deputies, which is like a kind of a cross between a Jewish trade union and the parliament, they invoked an inquiry into racial inclusivity within the Jewish community. To be sure that the Jewish community was in fact not behaving in a kind of white majoritarian manner towards its Middle Eastern members, its black members, and so on, and those of racial diversity within the community. The vast majority of Jews in Britain, of course, are white European Jews. And it threw up a lot of very interesting things, which largely didn't settle on the business of race as defined by color, but did talk a lot about differences as defined by culture. So groups of people being defined by their cultural heritage, the country from which they came, for example, or the manner in which they did their Jewishness, so that some groups were seen to be dominant and other groups were seen to be having difficulty in being heard. So that's all from within the Jewish community, but I guess that makes Jews very aware of the fact that when you're trying to talk about racial justice, racial inequality, it's not simply a color thing. It's not simply, you know, kind of white good, black bad, or the other way around. Because as anybody who's black knows, there are lots of different black communities and different places in the pecking order in the world, or brown or any other shade you want to describe. Right now, probably it's tougher to be a traveler who would be defined as white if they walked into a shop or a house or something, a traveller or a Roma, than to be anything else in Britain right now. So those things. Just to underpin this, though, with a Jewish concept and principle, in the Bible, specifically the bit that Jews take most seriously, the first 5 books, the Torah, it says more frequently than anything else, over 30 times, it says, be kind to the stranger because you were strangers in Egypt. And our rabbis ask, you know, why did God make the Jews go through the business of being slaves in Egypt? All right. If anybody's seen the film, you'll know, 10 Commandments, Exodus, whatever, that story, being slaves in Egypt and coming out of Egypt led by Moses and so forth. Why did they have to go through that? Why couldn't God, if these are God's people and he has a purpose for them. Why couldn't they do it some other way? And it is very, very clear and repeatedly said, because you have to know what it was like to be a slave. You have to know what it was like to be a stranger, right? An outsider. And that should sensitize the Jews to being the best kinds of people they can be in the world. And therefore, I think there are very, very few Jews who ever grow up without knowing what it's like to be an outsider, and without knowing what it's like, definitely, to be a minority. I mean, we're the tiniest group here on this call, I guess. And so that, I think, drives a lot of Jewish social action and awareness, and certainly for my own part. One last anecdote very quickly. Back in the 1950s, when I was at primary school, the first black boy turned up in my school in West London from Jamaica. I came home very excited to go, we've got a black boy in our class. We'd never seen one before, didn't know what it was like. And my dad said, did you make friends with him? And I said, well, he's only just arrived, I don't know. Dad said, well, tomorrow you go and make friends with him. I said, well, I don't know. He said, you go and make friends with him, Clive, you're a Jew. He's black, you make friends with him. Now, it's kind of, I was 7 or 8. It was kind of obvious. You got to do that. You welcome the stranger and you know what it's like to be in a minority.
Thank you very much, Clive. And we go to you, Shiv. What is your take on these matters?
Right. My name is Shiv Sama. I represent Hindu community in Bristol. As any other religion, all religions say the same thing, that we must live together, must learn to accept each other, and that's the only way forward. But saying that, most people, once they see black or white or brown or whatever, as everybody says, it changes your perception of the person. It shouldn't be. We are still human beings. We are still the same people. We may have a different color, may come from a different country. But until we start to live together and accept each other as a good neighbor and a good human, we are not going to get far. We've been talking about this for generations, about the same thing. I think we are in the 21st century. We have learned a lot. We all have went through different hardship, as you say. We all had to go through a bit of racism, unfairness, and all different things. Especially with the COVID, we have learned a lot how hard it is to live on your own without the society. It is very difficult. God has given us a chance, another chance to better ourselves, learn to live with our neighbors and the community and the cohesion. And that's only one way we can understand each other. We can behave better towards each other. That's the best I can say, because we all know that. We all know that, but when it comes to act, we don't. Unless we do that, nothing's going to change. We have to change ourselves before we expect somebody else to change. Unless we change ourselves, we can't expect anybody else to change. But most of the time, we want somebody else to change, not me, which is the biggest problem. Thank you very much.
Before you go, what is your own faith background?
I am a Hindu, and I represent Bristol Hindu Temple.
And what does Hinduism teach about this issue?
Same thing as other religion. Be good to your neighbor, be good to your human being fellows. Try to help anybody who's looking for help. Even sometimes they're not looking for help. You know somebody needs a help. Give them a hand. Give them help. Make understand each other that we all need each other. Lately, we have been seeing a lot of racism. Not that has been lately, it always has been, but it has come to light more of within the last 6 months. And unless we learn from that and work towards the equal society, equal rights, we're not going to get anywhere. Hinduism teaches you that every person is equal. It says in our Gita that God is the only one who have created all of us. It doesn't matter what color creed we are. There's only one God. We may believe it in a different form, but the God is still one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Shiv. Thank you. And Zainab.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zainab. I'm a Muslim and I'm Nigerian. I work at the University of Leicester. So a lot has been said here today. And I'm really happy. It's like we're all singing the same song, because really it is all about love, respect, tolerance. That is what my religion teaches me. In Islam, you know, there is no room for disrespect, and we are all equal in the eyes of Allah, the Creator. So we all believe in one God. But I think we should also go back and look inwards, all of us, within our own communities, Muslims, Christians, Hindus, all of us, Buddhists, all. We should question ourselves, how do we even look at each other within our own communities? Sometimes you see that within even the Muslim communities, there are differences. Some believe they are more religious than the others. The same, I've seen that in the Christian religion and other religions. But as human beings, what do you stand to gain by disrespecting someone? As a Black person, I know I have been looked at, you know, in a negative way, or as a Muslim, for example, when there's one terrorist attack or something, they look at me as a Muslim because of my hijab, and some look at me as the first thing that comes to their mind is the issue of being a terrorist, you know, and sometimes you fill forms, which I think many of us have gone through, and you are asked, you know, your ethnicity. Even within Blacks, they will say, you should say, are you African? Are you Caribbean? Are you maybe British or what? Why should we be asked such things? We should come together, all of us. It doesn't matter, like all of you have said, you can be brown, purple, orange, maroon. It doesn't matter. We're all human. What affects one human being affects us all. So I think the issue of race is something that is really important. And going back to our own values, for those of us that are faith-based, we have religions, you know, we believe in God, you know, even those that don't have any religious belief, we are one. Why don't we come together and speak out? Sometimes you're walking on the street, you see someone being disrespected because of the color of his or her skin. What do you stand to gain by walking away? I see that happen a lot here in the UK. People tend to, perhaps I should mind my own business, let me walk away. But no, why should you walk away and leave someone? And for those that have the opportunities to speak out at maybe where policies are being made, I think the issue of race should be brought to the fore. It's not something that should be only tackled maybe in terms of maybe any religion. We are one, so we should come together, love each other and support each other. Without that and respect for each other, then I don't think we're going to make progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zainab. I think your call to action is very important. It's also been repeated. Kathy, Shiv, and Clive, you've also repeated that call to action that as people and also as people of faith, when we see inequalities, when we see racial injustice happening, we need to respond. How do we respond?
We respond by giving a voice to the voiceless, by giving everyone an opportunity to engage on the same platform. For example, gender issues. I come from a society where women in so many areas in my country are relegated to the background. Sometimes because of our culture, we're socialized into this, culture of silence, like a woman is supposed to be seen, are not heard. But women, we have a lot to say. So I believe everyone should be given an opportunity. If maybe in your local community, you have maybe your mayor, or or maybe you can start maybe with some of the religious leaders, for example, for me, the imams in the mosque. If there are issues I see, I believe I should be able to speak out to them, not being confrontational, but explain to them in a peaceful way so that they understand. As part of my research, I look at issues to do with conflicts, violence, non-violence, inequalities, marginalization, and I focus a lot on women. So I believe everyone's voice should be heard, not only a selected few, but all of us should be able to engage. You start from your own local level. And for some of the leaders that we have, they should be, responsive. They should give a listening ear and listen to some of the issues affecting, some of us. Some of us, if you've been targeted, maybe racist issues, some are even afraid to speak out. I know that within the Black community, within the Arab community, people are afraid to voice it out. So why should we, I think, was it Clive that mentioned, or is it Shiv, that we're in this century and still people are being denied a voice? Why? So I think voices should be heard at all levels. And our leaders should, look at it in an inclusive way and carry people along. For example, the churches, the mosques, synagogues, all. It doesn't matter what religion, we're all human. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to come in and respond to this question? Yes, Kate.
Yeah, just picking up on something Zainab said about the hearing a wide range of voices. I do think that whole impetus in terms of people being willing and generous to listen to the stories of others. So listening to the stories of others is important in terms of our ability to hear the other perspective. And also, I think also being mindful of those stories helps and enables us to counteract and to resist the media's framing of groups of people. So where the media demonizes certain groups and communities, or weaponizes or politicizes some of these really destructive narratives, when we connect across cultures, when we connect across faith groups by being open and generous in our willingness to hear that story or those other stories, I think can counteract some of what we're witnessing in this day and age, because the whole framing of what we're being fed really comes, I would say, from a lot of the times from the media. And, we need to rise up against some of that rhetoric, really.
Clive and Shiv, is there anything you do? Yes, Clive.
Yeah, this is very challenging stuff, isn't it? I'm just thinking about what Zainab said about women in her own home community, presumably you're talking about in Nigerian society. This is so tricky, isn't it? Because there are people who, in what shall we say, a misplaced desire to be respectful of Nigerian culture, they say, well, that's how Nigerians do it. It's not for us to challenge the way in which women are, to use your expression, kind of pushed to the back. The most famous example of that, I suppose, is not Nigeria specifically, but female genital mutilation. You go, well, that's a cultural thing. How can you argue with it? We go, well, no, it's just wrong, right? When do you have the courage to say, well, I don't care whether that's how you do it in your group or your place, it's just wrong. And you start doing that too much, you start putting down other people who are just doing it differently. And that's really, that seems to me to be a massively difficult line to draw between when it doesn't feel right to me, I wouldn't do that, and when I'm supposed to say to somebody else, well, you shouldn't do it either. And in Jewish thought, two things. First of all, we have in the Bible the statement that God made Adam, the first human being, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. Right, so this predates Jews, and there were no Jews or Christians or Muslims. There were just people in those days, right? That's Adam and Eve and their family. So the idea that human beings are created in the image of God, that immediately says it doesn't matter what you believe, what you think, how you behave, anything else. You have a spark of the divine in you, and you have an utter right to the dignity and respect that that implies. But then, according to the biblical story, God picks out this family, the family of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and the Israelite nation, and cultivates a particular relationship with the Israelites, the Jews, and gives them certain commandments to live by, and tells them how to live their lives, and food laws and all kinds of things. And Jews don't expect anybody else to do those things, right? And we don't think anybody else is bad or wrong or evil or something if they, if they eat pork or something that Jews don't do. That's for different people. And therefore, Jews are committed not only to the broad idea of the unity of humanity, all right, all people created equal, but also the fundamental structure of diversity, that God designed it that people would be different. Different individually, obviously, we're all different, but different culturally and collectively as well. So there'd be a group of Jews and there'd be a group of whatever, Egyptians or whatever you've got biblically and thereafter. And God is interested in all of those different groups. Of course, Jews are particularly interested in how God expects us to behave and paying attention to that. And this interplay between diversity and unity, so unity but not uniformity, seems to me to be the real challenge. When do we ask people to behave in common and to do things collectively? And when do we allow people to do their own thing? When do we actually say, no, I recognize that you are different. You think differently to me. You have different approaches to me, all kinds of things like that. And nevertheless, or as well, I may not understand it, but I respect it. I want to find out more about it. Tell me more about where you stand. And that shouldn't threaten me in my own position. And of course, it shouldn't prevent me from saying, okay, well, that's very interesting. But I have to say, I still think that's wrong on certain occasions and in certain circumstances, because we can't deny our sense of what is right and what we must stand for.
Thank you, Clive. Thank you. Yes, Shiv.
It's a very recent example. The Swindon Temple was ransacked the 5th time in recent years. And we are going back and forth with the council and the other authorities until they decided to have a march, which a lot of local people have as well. They joined the march. You can see a bit of movement in the authorities. So just tell you, unless we work together, we respect each other, we are not going to achieve very much. We can all talk about different meaning of different religion or commandments or whatever the case may be. In the end of the day, we're all supposed to live together, supposed to help each other. The message is the same. Some of the people may interpret with different ideas, their own ideas, and the media could portray in a different way, bidding against each other. Some days they will just be Indian people, it could be the worst situation, the other days it could be the black and the media is a lot to blame because they're trying to putting us against each other. And that creates a lot of problem. Then people forget who we are, but they think just one side of that frame. They don't see the other side. Because there's so much highlighted in the media that this particular religion is bad, they've done so much. Muslim done this, or Hindus did that, or the blacks did that, or you know what I mean? That creates a big divide. Unless we rise above that and look inside, not outside, look inside and feel that we are same human being. We are here to live together. This century is the more diverse century ever has been. More people are migrating, more people are living together, different communities are joining together, which never happened before. It's a bit of challenge for all of us. But again, I say, unless we respect each other, unless we try to understand each other, we are not going to get very far. This is the most important thing, that we must respect each other and must try to understand each other's faith, respect each other's faith, respect each other's color. Underneath the color, the blood is red. We all have the same blood. There's no difference. Thank you.
And before you go, Shiv, how did the council respond to the protest when you were protesting about how the temple was being ransacked?
Not very favorably. They have been struggling for that temple for 10 years. It's the same situation here. There's no difference. They'll talk about it, oh, we'll do this, we'll do that. When it comes to the crunch, nothing happens. Unless you come to, you shouldn't have to do the protest. You don't have to go out the street to look for your right. That's the last resort. That's what creates the problems. Because then you are highlighted that this community is doing this. Some people may like it, some people don't. It shouldn't go to that far. We all know, I could say South Gloucestershire here. There's apart from church, there's nothing else, no other religion, not even a community place for BME community, for diverse community. So it has to be looked at. Unless we accommodate everybody, we are dividing the people. Unless we give them the chance to get together, to have a cohesion, we are dividing. As long as we stay divided, there will always be problems. So we must, again, try to find a common place that where we can meet, we can attend, we can enjoy each other's festivals. That's the only way forward.
And talking about protests, this is a question for all of you. How has your faith or your background, your religious background influenced the way you've responded to movements like Black Lives Matter? We'll start with you, Clive. Yes.
Well, I think I've said a little bit about this already in many ways. And of course, perhaps people might also remember that in the American Civil Rights Movement, the natural allies of people like Martin Luther King were the Jews. The Jews were out there, and those young white men who were killed doing voter registration in Mississippi were Jews who'd come down from New York to participate in that back in the 60s. So that idea of a sense of solidarity, a sense of relationship, I remember back in the 70s or 80s when Yusuf Islam, the former Cat Stevens pop star, was trying to establish a Muslim school, and I was working at the Board of Deputies of British Jews. I worked very intensely to support Muslim aspirations in that. It seemed to me entirely unacceptable that if there were Catholic schools or Anglican schools or Jewish schools, that they shouldn't be Muslim schools if that's what they wanted. We can have a different discussion about whether they're a good idea generally, but just in simple terms of equality. So it's very, very obvious to Jews that we should make common cause with other minorities within Britain and around the world. You mentioned Black Lives Matter, and again, it's pretty obvious, first of all, in a sense, who could argue with those three words as a statement? That's kind of obvious, isn't it? Sadly, apparently not to some people, but certainly not an arguable thing. But when you put capital letters on it, Black Lives Matter, and it becomes an organization and a movement, it then becomes very difficult when Black Lives Matter, especially in the United States, not so much in Britain, called upon Black Lives Matter to demonstrate against Israel, which is a very important thing to the hearts and minds of Jews. This is our haven in the world, wherever we live. And to have Israel singled out as the only racist place on the planet to which Black Lives Matter must subscribe to challenge, that makes it much more difficult. So there are those tensions, but that has largely, I think, led Jews to say, well, okay, well, we might find it difficult to ally with that particular organization, but certainly not with that movement and that feeling. We're not going to step away from the principle just because we think the leadership of the organization may have got caught up in things that aren't going to help. So I think without doubt, it's self-evident, as I said before. You were strangers in Egypt 35 times mentioned. Recognize the stranger, be kind to the stranger. Of course, it's very important to remember that the vast majority of Black people on the planet are not a minority or anywhere in a minority. They're living in Africa, living in the Caribbean. This is not a minority place. It's a perfectly ordinary place to be a regular guy or goddess in those places. Similarly with Muslims, the vast majority of Jews on the planet know exactly what it's like to be a minority. We've never had, for 2,000 years, had nothing but the experience of being a minority. So our hearts go out to that. We've got to identify with it. That's clear.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to come in? Yes, Kathy.
Well, I think, as I've said, the God that I serve as a Christian is a God of justice. And as such, the message of Jesus seeks to address humanity's needs, including people who are oppressed or persecuted because of their race. So although I've lived with an awareness of racial injustices for most of my life, and it's interesting that we've got Clive with us, because I was raised in Palestine and Israel, and one of my earliest racist memories was a Jewish family spitting on us because of the color of our skin. And then growing up, having gone to, tertiary education in the United States, being treated badly by whites and also Blacks in the States, and then coming to Britain as well. More recently in Cornwall, I was literally attacked racially by a group of youths in their 20s. And this is going back about 2 or 3 years. So racism has been a part of, my lived experience, so to speak. But then when George Floyd was killed, I had such a visceral response to the truth that racism is still so real in this generation. I think it's Shiv who mentioned that, we've been dealing with racism for so long, generation on generation on generation, but something happened in the core of me this year. And I guess for me, the vehicle that I've used to process this sad reality is my faith. Because when you live with the hate and rejection of others, simply in my case, or for the context of this conversation, because of the color of your skin, or because I'm Nigerian or African, it affects you consciously and unconsciously. But I remain anchored in this extremely disorientating landscape because of my faith in God. And going back to the whole thing about, responding to movements on Black Lives Matter, I think the ideology of the movement is really important, because the statement is true. All lives matter. So Black lives have to matter, as well as Jewish lives, as well as Indian lives, as well as African lives. But we live in a society where Black lives are literally being threatened on so many different levels and in so many different ways. And for me, there's something about rising to that call to respond in some way, to say, actually, in this day and age, we have to acknowledge the truth that Black and brown-skinned colored lives are being affected so negatively in our generation. And as you know, we have to be honest with ourselves. There is a sense in which within our own communities, we have to talk about the way Black lives matter in different ways. So for example, speaking about the Nigerian context, you know, different skin tones, you know, the lighter skin you are, the more kudos you've got, you know, and those conversations need to be had, as well as the whole, you know, why do whites treat Black people badly in many spaces?
Thank
Can I
you.
come in?
Yes, please.
Okay, good. So in Islam, it says, Allah says, your faith is not complete unless you love for your brother, you know, for the other person, what you love for yourself. So yes, Black lives matter. All lives matter, just like my sister Catherine said, you know. So it goes beyond the color of your skin, you know. Black lives matter. We all saw the killing of George Floyd. It was there, it was captured. We all saw. And going back, you know, to the civil rights movements in the US, I remember the late John Lewis, he said, you have to to fight for your rights, you have to be prepared to get into trouble. But he said you should get into good trouble. So if it means coming out to be vocal, to ask for your rights, then you have to. And if maybe if the movement had been crushed, you know, I don't think we would have seen the kind of justice, you know, relative justice we got. Well, I say we because I'm Black, you know, for George Floyd. And I was really happy to see that there was a lot of support. And going back to the Israel-Palestinian issue, this is a major thing, which is like, is a discussion that maybe it will come up another time. But one thing I want to say to Clive is that, just like Catherine said, the role of the media in humanizing or demonizing maybe people and religions, I came across a few years ago, there was something happened in Palestine, and I saw groups of young Jewish, you know, youths, you know, Jewish, they came out and they were in support of the Palestinians. But you see, this is something you hardly ever see in the media. And the majority, people don't really understand. You know, people don't even know that things like these are happening. Instead, you know, it's just, you know, one-sided, maybe, no, it's like one against the other. Yes, there are issues. Yes, there are inequalities. But I think it is important that to have opportunities, forums like this, where we can come together, you know, to talk and share, exchange ideas and share knowledge, you know, because for me, when I go back to some of my groups, study groups, you know, that we study the Quran together, whatever I learn from here, I'm definitely going to carry back to them, because just like I said, in most cases, the story is one-sided. So we need to come and raise awareness so that people will understand that, yes, maybe there are issues, for example, in Israel, maybe the state is this, but there are local people that are doing a lot in terms of maybe interfaith relationships. I know they're happening. So I think we need more opportunities like this. And maybe when we come here, so what happens after this, our webinar? We should, each one of us should, you know, take something away and go and share within our own communities. This is something that will also help raise awareness. Thank you.
Shiv, is there anything you want to add?
we can all blame each other, whatever we want to, that this community did this to the other community did that. We all been through the same thing. There's no community has escaped the hatred of the other community. We all been through that. If we keep going on that circle, you're just going round and round. In our religion, it says you must love every human, regardless of race or color or whatever the case may be. What we need to take it from here is that we must make an effort to understand each other, understand each other's culture, each other's practices. That fear we have that, oh, I don't know what that guy is doing. Maybe he's doing something different, so it couldn't be good. Until we understand what that religion or what that person, individual is doing, unless we try to understand that, then so actually he's doing the exactly same thing I am doing, but only doing it differently. All religions still tell you the same one single thing, that we are all human beings, should be equal. We should love each other and help each other. Thank you.
Before we come to you, Clive, maybe I should also put this question to you. What, in your view, does Black Lives Matter mean for a place like the UK? And again, this is for all of you.
I'll go. We are here in the UK. This is a different society than where we have come from. We may have a different practices whichever country we come from, but here in UK, we have the opportunity to become better, to live together, to understand each other better, and help each other better. We're all small communities in different towns. Unless the community have a cohesion with the neighborhoods, doesn't matter who it is, who's your neighbor is. Unless we are prepared to help, especially during the COVID, we have seen the people becoming better, trying to help anybody and everybody. And I've seen that. They were helping, they were out there, they were giving food to different people, they were looking after each other. Why can't we do that every day? Why can't we do that in a normal circumstances? If we did that every day in a everyday practice, I think the society will become better. And that's what is needed. Thank you.
We'll go to Clive and then we come to Zainab.
So I'm a little reluctant to talk too much about Black Lives Matter because this is a thing, I mean, I've said already, it seems to me self-evident. I can't see that one could argue with the meaning of the words. And I don't know enough about the construct of the organization here in the UK to say anything about how it stands and what what its priorities are exactly. I take Catherine's point that she said before about, of course, all lives matter, that's obvious, and that, but in this place at this time, you need to assert that Black lives matter because we know that they get a raw deal in this place, and therefore that's why you've got to say it. You're not saying and other lives don't. You're saying just pay attention to this because there's a lot of people who don't think that they do. So I recognise that, and I think it's important that there's a similar movement, not dissimilar, I guess, to the Me Too movement. It doesn't mean you don't care about everybody else, but you've got to pay attention to those particular injustices. What I do know is that within the Black community, there are different dynamics and different speeds in terms of integration or acceptance or whatever. My consciousness is, for example, of Nigerians, progressing pretty intensely in British society, while Caribbeans, particularly Caribbean young men, frequently being left a long way behind. I'm sure those are overgeneralizations, but the things that I've observed. Similarly, amongst South Asians, I think Bangladesh is being left a long way behind East African Asian people of East African Asian origin. So it's not simple enough to say, well, this person's black and therefore they have. However, having said that, I'm absolutely sure that in general, a person walking into a room with a black face probably has more to watch out for, be guarded for, worry about, address, pay attention to, than most people with a black face. And I know far too many black parents who've had to have that conversation with their kids about keeping their heads down and not getting into trouble and avoiding, because the consequences are rapidly worse for many young black people. So I think having a movement like that is critically important. It pushes people to have to think about the inequalities that exist. I think it's a little bit unfortunate, it's not a big deal, it's a little bit unfortunate that it's perhaps picked up the entire lock, stock and body rhetoric from America, because I think the narrative is different and the circumstances are different. And as a result, it becomes possible perhaps for people in Britain to say, well, that's just not here, it's different, that's over there. So we fail to focus on the fact that there continue to be inequalities and injustices here in the same way. But not necessarily with the same dynamic. But so I think it's great that there's a movement like that, and I think it's kind of long overdue. And can I just say from this conversation, I'm learning a lot. Zainab said before about, why do they ask us these questions on the census? Why do we have to say whether we're black or white or Nigerian or whatever, right? Jews have asked, why doesn't there have a question on the census that allows Jews to say that they're an ethnic group, right? The census doesn't recognize us ethnically. There's no box to fill in. We don't have it. And yet we're one of, if not the oldest ethnic minority in the country, and we're not visible. So it's kind of odd. Ethnicity shouldn't be about color. So they do allow for Irish and so on, but Jews are not there. So I'm listening to all the diverse angles on this, and it is odd. And I just, if I may say very quickly, I'm appalled at Catherine's experience in Israel. I think that's, it's not my place to apologize for it, but I regret it hugely. But you rightly said, I assume you rightly said that those people were Jews, and I guess that's so. I don't know if you spoke to them or didn't, but you could tell, presumably. But when you were in Cornwall, you didn't say these people were Christians. I have no idea what they were. And presumably nor did you, unless you had a conversation with them. So, sometimes we bunch people into a bag, so there's Zainab, she's a Muslim from Nigeria. So, what have you got to say about Boko Haram, justify it, that kind of thing. We kind of say, well, you belong to that group, so you've got to answer for them. Some groups are more visible or more identifiable, so we label them that way. But of course, that was a bunch of bigots who shouldn't have behaved in that way. At the same time, Israel was the only country to airlift people out of the Ethiopian famine and take 100,000 of them into their own country and save their lives. So, and they were black. So what's going on? I have no idea. But I am appalled that you experienced that. That's horrible. Sorry, at my primary school, where I met my first West Indian boy, at my primary school, I was beaten up back in the 1950s for killing Jesus. Now, I personally don't believe that the kids who beat me up cared who killed Jesus. Probably didn't know very much about it. I think they beat me up because I was fat and unpleasant, and that's really why they did. But they wanted to ennoble the task. So they found themselves a cause, right? It sounds much more impressive, doesn't it, if you're doing this on behalf of God than if you're just doing it on the behalf of being a bully. So you dress it up. I'm attacking you because you're other, but I'm going to make it sound virtuous and principled. That didn't lead me to hate all Christians, let me say. But it was an early experience like yours, Catherine. And you've got to, well, you've done it too, I'm sure. You've got to work away from it somehow. Yeah.
So we go to Zainab and then Kathy, if you want to come in.
I think a lot has been said. Just to add a little, in terms of movements, social movements like Black Lives Matter. Yes, normally you talk about movements in terms of ideologies, among other things, but the Black Lives movement to me is positive, and I am one that supports it 101%, because it's not only about Black lives, all lives matter, So the more people come out to speak, I think the better understanding and response that we get. For example, thinking about maybe Blacks and relationships here, or let's say, okay, different faiths here in the UK. How open are our mosques, our churches, the synagogues, the temples, all? How open are they? For example, in my country, Nigeria, when it's Christmas, for example, it is Christmas, because we wait for our Christian brothers and sisters, to come back, and we visit each other. We go to enjoy, we eat together, we celebrate. When it's Eid, we are together, Yes, we go to the mosque and come back and the celebrations begin. But here, we should question ourselves also, our relationships with our neighbors, for example. Here we have this culture that you just mind your own business. Sometimes you see neighbors not even saying hello to each other. But I think we need to do much more. As a Black person, for me, and as a Muslim, is about love, respect, and tolerance. So I'll respect you. I won't disrespect you, because my Allah talks against, disrespecting anyone. So I should respect whoever I meet, because even sometimes that impression is important. And also maybe when it comes to preaching sermons in the mosques, in the, all religious, we should also, hear our leaders talking about, the importance of coming together, of supporting each other, of the fact that you're white or pink or purple doesn't mean you should look down on any other person. Or maybe you think maybe the Black is more superior. No, we are all equal in the eyes of the Lord. But how do we conduct ourselves? We need to start coming together, even within our small communities, to be reaching out, and start engaging rather than keeping to ourselves. Thank you.
Kathy, if you want to come in.
Just a brief comment, I think, which I think has been underscored by my colleagues on the panel, is that this is a human problem. The way we mistreat one another, it's not really about whites or Blacks, it's about humanity. We just need to do better in the way we live out our faith models, because all of us agree that our faith teaches us to love one another, to love the stranger, to love the other, to love those on the outside. And yet society, we look all around and we still keep getting it wrong. So I would say it really is a human problem, and we need to figure out how we connect better with one another so that we can actually live in a more flourishing way, really.
So on that, what can people do as individuals and also as communities? What can they do at grassroots level around issues to do with racial justice, racialized injustices?
As we see since the statue incident and the incident in America, things have changed a bit. You can see more ethnic faces in your ads on TV, on different programs. The government has a program now to get more Black people into the police force, the media, whatever the case may be. But saying that, we have to have a same level. I'm one of them. I run, as I say, a race equality network. It's the same thing. We are trying to get more and more people in. But the people are still reluctant. They still have that small fear that, well, I'm a Black, am I really invited here? That is not the case. We are asking people, everybody, unless we bring ourselves forward, we can't bring people, get people from the house. We have to make an effort. Everybody has to make an effort. We had as I just read one of the comments, we had a Ganesh festival for 10 days in the temple. And our doors were open. Anybody and everybody's welcome. There's a lot of different community people came in. They were just served as same as me or anybody else. Unless we come to that point where everybody is welcome, we celebrate our Diwali, which is coming soon. We invite everybody. Doesn't matter who it is. You're welcome. You join, you understand us. We try to understand you. That's the way to work. I'm not saying we are the best people, but that's how it should be. Unless we open the door, whether it's a church, mosque, whatever, to everybody, we are not connecting. We must connect to each other to solve this. Even though the government is trying their bit, we have to try our bit as well. Unless we try, nothing's going to happen. Every individual have to make that little bit effort to understand all our neighbors, all different communities, make a bit of time. Give it an even smile. One little smile makes a lot of difference. If you meet somebody you don't know, smile's not going to cost you anything. It might make somebody's day happier. Thank you.
Kathy and then Clive.
Well, I think you mentioned in the opening of the session that I was a writer and a poet. And I do find that the creative arts provide a medium in which people of faith or people from faith backgrounds and all backgrounds, in fact, can offer a space for connection, the connection that we've been speaking so much about, for conversation that could potentially lead to healing of sorts. So for example, going back to when George Floyd was killed, one of the things that I felt I needed to do was I pitched the idea to set up a cathedral poetry competition where people of all faiths and no faiths could come together to think about diversity and inclusion and what the good news stories are, or what are the things that we're wrestling with. And the outcome of that competition is we're now going to have a festival in October at the Cathedral to showcase a lot of the winners and the runners up, and to invite the city in, whatever faith background you're from. And I just think that the creative arts are such a wonderful resource and tool in terms of connecting with others, the same way as sports, you know, getting some intercultural or faith-based sports teams together. Those are powerful things. And also doing joint projects together, bring the faith groups and communities together. And I think we just need to do more of that, as well as, of course, sharing meals together. There's nothing like a good meal with different groups and communities.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. You wanted to say something, Clive?
Yes, I think, I mean, there is a lot of extremely good stuff going on the ground. Zainab mentioned stuff that she'd seen in Israel. It very rarely breaks in above the surface in media attention, as it were. And I want to endorse what Kathy said. Is Kathy okay, Catherine? Kathy's all right, yeah, okay. I want to endorse what Kathy said. And it might have sounded like a counsel of despair, but I think it's actually a counsel of reality from which we can work. When she said this is a human problem, right? Human beings, I think, and maybe it's, what do I know about evolutionary development, but human beings are probably developed to be a little nervous about things they don't recognize, they don't understand. It's probably a defense, isn't it? You don't know what it's going to be like. So you see the unlike, and you shy away from it. You're not sure what to do. And Zainab mentioned about, especially this rather British thing of keeping yourself to yourself and that thing. And it could be understood to be a kind of respect. I don't want to interfere. I'm best left alone. I best not get involved. So I see Zainab walking down the street and I see she's wearing a hijab. And I think to myself, well, that's very odd. I wonder what she's up to. Why is she doing that? But I'm not going to ask her because it might offend her and I don't know what to say and so on and so forth, right? Well, it seems to me that we talk a lot about, well, tolerance is the minimum, and we talk about respect, which is much better. But what I'd really like to see people cultivate and schools to teach kids to do and all of us to talk about is curiosity. Right, learning how to ask in a fruitful way about the things that intrigue me. Right now, I could trample about and do all kinds of damage, couldn't I? Saying to somebody, what's it like being you? Aren't you strange? Right, and I could alienate folk and upset them. But if I've learned how to ask the question and I'm asking genuinely, I don't think most people are offended by a genuine question. I know certainly that I'd much rather people ask me, why are you doing that? Or what do Jews think or something, than that they just left me alone and made up their own fiction or imagined their own answer or believed what they read on the internet or something. But if we could cultivate curiosity and encourage people, therefore, to talk to each other and ask them why, why do you do that? What's that about? Not all the time, drive everybody up the wall, but just sometimes. I think that would be a tremendous step in the right direction. And certainly social opportunities and organizational opportunities to get together. I think of Nisan Nashim, which is an alliance between Jewish and Muslim women. Shalom Salam, which is an organization in Bristol that's between Jews and Muslims. Of course, the Council of Christians and Jews has been going since, well, interestingly, it was founded when news of the Holocaust started to come through in 1942-43. The chief rabbi and the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time, William Temple, got together to create the Council of Christians and Jews, a kind of assertion of hope in one of the darkest moments. And I think, Jewish communities, especially in larger centres, participate in hosting a local Muslim community for an iftar during Ramadan. So the things of that sort. I know when I was a teenager, I used to go and work in the hospitals on Christmas Day in order to release staff so they could go and spend time with their families. That was a very common thing for Jews to do before people decided that the double pay was probably better and they could do Christmas the next day or whatever it was. But Jews certainly used to do that a lot on Christmas Day, helping out, participating. And I think it was Kathy who said that working together on projects is really very valuable. So there's face-to-face dialogue, when I sit down with Muslims or Hindus or Christians or whatever, and we talk about what we're about. And there's great value in that. But there's also shoulder-to-shoulder interfaith stuff, where we stand together to do something, whether it's helping at a soup kitchen or cleaning up a park or whatever. There's a fabulous project in the Jewish community called Mitzvah Day in November. Tens of thousands of Jews all around, around the country and around the world, seek to do some good on that day to their wider community, whatever it might be. And it's become an interfaith activity. Which prompted Seva Day for the Hindus, and also a project by Muslims on a different day. So Jews could take part in the Muslim day, Muslims could take part in the Jewish day. And these shoulder-to-shoulder social projects, I think, are great ways for people, while working on a common thing, just kind of glance across and go, so tell me, what's it like being you? And again, you've started that curiosity, which I think exposes the common humanity that Shiv is such a good advocate for, but also enables the discovery of our beautiful differences, which is what makes the world sparkle after all. If we were all really the same, wouldn't that be dull?
And Zainab, do you think, what can people do as individuals and also as communities about issues around racial justice, racial injustice?
I think the most important thing for me, one is the issue of understanding, our differences, but most importantly, we need to look at each other as humans. So we need to come together, okay? Just like Clive, Shiv, Catherine, all have said today, we need to come together. You see, there are issues. As a Muslim, for example, as a Black woman, if I maybe come across, maybe have one experience of maybe something that I consider as being racist, I should be able to, if I meet Clive, I should be able to reach out to him and say, this is what happened to me. What do you think I should do, for example, or even ask Catherine? That is my belief, because it is something that affects us all. It cuts across the board. So we should come together. We need to come together and support, just like Clive said, there's the face-to-face and shoulder-to-shoulder. Yes, we should think about so many projects that we can do together. And this thing should go down, even to primary schools, share, break this down to the level of the children at that level. Explain to them that it is important to come together, to be friends. I remember a long time ago, my little one came back from school and she said to me, Mama, and I said, yes, is it true that Allah will be angry with me if I make friends with non-Muslims? And I said, who told you about that? And she said, oh, someone asked me in school. And I said, no. I said, remember, in Nigeria, can you remember? I mentioned some of the children that were in her class. And she said, yes, I remember. Remember, are they not your friends? She said, yes, they are my friends. So I said to her, we're all the same. Okay, you should be friends with everyone, not only someone that maybe you see in the mosque. You should be friends with everyone. So this is something we have to do at different levels. We have to engage, like Clive said, shoulder to shoulder. There's a lot we can do. It is a challenge because of, realities in the world we live in. But I think as human beings, we need to put in the effort. It doesn't stop at just saying, so we just have to, back everything up with actions. And for example, I've been invited to several interfaith dialogues and I go, if I'm asked, I talk about my religion. I remember someone I met about almost 10 days ago at Bristol during the Bristol Synod thing. And she said to me, Zainab, there was a time when I see women wearing hijab, I get scared and I run away from them. And I said to her, no, just smile. Sometimes they don't even have the confidence to smile at you because they don't know the reaction they will get from you. But I said, that smile that was mentioned today says a lot, So I'm human and I'm the type that I'm always very happy. Ask me and I will tell you, because I believe if people understand maybe issues to do with my culture as an African, okay, and then my religion as a Muslim, I think people will try to understand. This is something we do sometimes in our study groups. When I was doing my PhD, I came into a very supportive group. There was no issues to do with religion or color. We were just one. And sometimes when I had issues, my colleagues were there to support me, and it's from, so many countries in the world. So why don't we, start, like I said, even at our, where we live, our local communities, start engaging, even with our neighbors. That smile says a lot. And then we can back it up. Any opportunity, maybe there are projects, reach out. I'm always very happy to be a part of this because I believe we're human and we need to work together in order to make progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Zainab. Thank you. So I think this takes us now to the Q&A. Maybe how we will do it is if anyone who's got a question and wants to speak, maybe, I don't know if they can raise their hands and if they're okay to be on camera. Or if not, then maybe one of us will read the question on their behalf.
Hello, yes, so I've been keeping track. So hello audience, do post any questions you'd like to ask into the chat now. We've got a couple. So the first one that came in was from Jenny Weeks, and her question was, should we move away from all kinds of racial classification?
Who wants to go first? Yes, Clive.
All racial classification is stupid, right? There's no two ways about it. In terms of trying to define people, we saw this in apartheid South Africa, didn't we? You know, who's black exactly, and you had white people who were classified as black and black people who were classified as white, and any sensible human being looking at people wouldn't have known what was going on. In Nazi Germany, as you know, they made people wear yellow stars, Jews wear yellow stars in order to identify Jews on the street. And yet Nazis insisted that you could recognize Jews by measuring the length of their noses and stuff. Well, if that was true, why did they have to wear a yellow star? I mean, even the Nazis knew that it was nonsense. And then you had Hitler supporting the Aryans, tall, blonde, sorry, forgive me, Shiv, because the Aryans were a lot better than the Nazis pretended. But, you know, tall, blonde, blue-eyed characters. And there's Hitler, a little short, brown-eyed bloke, you know, bigging up the blonde, blue-eyed ones. So it is a nonsense. So trying to classify is bound to lead to absurdities, because at the very least, there are people on the margins, there are mixed folk who don't belong in one group or another, and any of those things. If, however, and I don't know if the question implies this, that we're trying to avoid recognizing that people are different and diverse, then I think that would be a terrible loss. And I think it's wonderful to know that Zainab comes from a Nigerian background, because that gives me a whole mass of stuff to talk to her about. And Catherine's given a little bit of an insight into her own history. There's a massive stuff there to pick up and explore. Is that, you know, that those differences are fascinating things, and we should be interested in it, and people should be able to, in a sense, sort of give themselves a label. I mean, I've said I'm a Jew. You know, people can pick that up and respond to it. I'm also obviously a white male, which is a lot less interesting. But so there's, you know, I like that, but I think people should be allowed to classify themselves, and it shouldn't be something that, I mean, thank God, I don't think it happens in Britain too much, that people are forced into classifications which then have formal consequences to them. And now we're seeing that about the gender binary, aren't we? About whether people should be forced into being named as men or women, or whether they can find their own place in that process.
Is there anyone else who wants to come in on that question? Yes, Kathy.
Yeah, I think I just want to emphasize what Clive has said. I'm a very proud Black African woman, and that is a part of my identity, my heritage, my legacy, my ancestry, and I would hate to lose that. However, classifications that diminish or belittle or destroy a person's dignity or value or place in the world, of course, shouldn't be allowed at all. I mean, that's so destructive for the whole community. But I do think that there's something very beautiful and powerful about the way the divine has created such variety and difference and just beauty. So I think we need to hold on to the positives when people want to, you know, identify in a particular way, but it's allowing people to identify how they choose to identify rather than projecting or inferring or assuming. So that's my take on that.
Yes.
So for me, identity first is Islam. I'm a Muslim and I'm Black. I'm Nigerian. So I agree with all that has been said. The fact that maybe my identity as a Black Muslim woman is visible, is pronounced, doesn't mean I should be treated negatively, doesn't mean that I should be denied certain opportunities. I should be given the opportunity to compete on a, level playing ground. So I think this is the important thing for us to really understand, rather than, yes, it is. Or sometimes when I talk, for example, to my students, I always say, okay, forgive me if I say something offensive, but I don't mean to be disrespectful. I'm only saying it the way I understand it, but please feel free, to educate me, to guide me so that I will understand maybe some of these things, because really there are cultural issues, for example, being African, but I think understanding that, yes, we have where we should be free to identify whichever way, but we should not be disadvantaged because of that. Thank you.
It's a very simple thing that people generally say, that, oh, you're different. We are different. We are all different. We all come from different countries. So we represent different culture. As long as we don't impose our culture to somebody else, impose our religion onto somebody else, we are fine. We are all here to ask a question. That's nothing wrong with that. Because we are different, people are looking at us differently. They can ask, oh, where are you from? That's not insulting, really. It is. We are telling, right, I'm Hindu, I'm proud to be. I'm living in Bristol, I'm proud to be that as well. So unless we try to take better understanding of we must live our own culture in our own houses. Nobody's going to stop that. Nobody's going to change that. But when we are out, we are in the different, the whole society, we must act better to each other. Whatever we do in our own house, that's our culture. That's how we live. So nobody's going to change us how we live. So we shouldn't change anybody else how they live. So once we get that bit of respect between all of us, things will get better.
And then there's also, on this question, one of the ways in which the current government responded to the Black Lives Matter movement was to commission a group, to put together a group and ask them to investigate issues around racism, race relations in the UK. And the group produced a report, which is the CWO report, which categorically denied the existence of institutional racism in Britain. And at the same time, one of its recommendations was that we should move away from, the country should move away from using Black, Asian, and minority ethnic BIME as a way of talking about people. But then the problem with that, giving Leicester as an example, is that you are more likely to be unemployed in Leicester if you are Black than if you're white. And that gap is nationally significant. So significant that even the DWP has noted it. And then we also looked at unemployment, at who job centers in Leicester were sanctioning over a 5-year period. And we found that people from Black, Chinese, and mixed heritage backgrounds were overrepresented in who people were sanctioned. And this was happening year in, year out over a period of 5 years. If we didn't have these categories, if the statistics didn't collect people's ethnicity or ethnic backgrounds, these inequalities wouldn't have been exposed the way that they are. And we wouldn't have a way of talking about them, I don't think. I don't know. What is your view? Yes, Clive.
Until I past the line of 70, at which point you become too old and decrepit to make a reasonable judgment, apparently. I was a magistrate. As a magistrate, you're called upon to make judgments about certain crimes which can be racially aggravated. So they're recognized in law, the idea that somebody can commit a crime, not only, bash you on the head, Ambrose, but bash you on the head because you're black, and that's worse than just being bashed on the head. And therefore the punishment should be worse. That's recognized in law. So racially aggravated or sexually aggravated, there are other categories as well, is a recognized thing. And I think that's very proper and quite right. For me as a Jew, interestingly enough, and if anybody knows this, Jews are disproportionately more subject to racially aggravated crime than any other group in Britain. Now, these things are directed against, obviously, visible and identifiable Jews. I think it was Zainab who mentioned the guys with the black hats and so forth, those guys, or Jewish buildings, synagogues, cemeteries are constantly being damaged and graffitied and so forth. So there's a category, and in that sense, those categories are very necessary in order to be able to identify what's really going on in the world. I do understand the thing, I didn't agree with the Seal report, but I do understand the unease about institutional racism, because of course there are people in those institutions who are appalled at the idea of being kind of swept along, being identified as somehow being racist, when it's, as it were, it's not true for them. And I was for several years on the Metropolitan Police Authority down in London, which was the first place to be called institutionally racist after the Stephen Lawrence killing, and the consequences of that, the Macpherson report. And I understood what it meant by institutional racism, but I also understood that there were a lot of really decent police officers who had never dreamt of being racist, who suddenly felt themselves kind of besmirched by this accusation. So I did understand it was a difficult accusation, but I think taken overall, it's an important analysis, which then forces an institution to examine itself and change its behavior. I think that's good and right. As for BAME, Black, Minority, Ethnic, as I've said already, I think they're quite clumsy categories because there are so many subdivisions within them. But taken overall, one would much rather be white than not white in Britain in lots of circumstances. Unless, of course, as I say, you're a traveller or Roma, in which case you're right at the bottom of the heap, I think. You have it worse than just about anybody else. That's my reading of the situation at the moment. The levels of quiet antagonism, prejudice and discrimination against Roma, Sinti travellers in Britain is utterly appalling. It shocked me to the core when I first came across it. It's appalling. And indeed, those groups are so excluded from society, and to some extent, they exclude themselves, are so excluded from society that they don't even figure on the statistics because they don't get counted in at all. But I didn't agree with the Shaw report. I could see what it was trying to do, but I thought it wasn't helpful.
Can I just add a little about the report? I think the reality is, Ambrose, whether they accept it or not, it exists. Institutional racism exists. So it goes beyond, well, they can come up with their report and say no. Well, we know it is true. It happens, on a daily basis. So it is one thing for them to say that, and another thing for us to know, because to know the reality, So I think it still goes down to us, If you come across such, you should be able to speak out. I know universities are doing a lot to check some of these issues. There are so many support groups, among other things, but sometimes people are really scared you know, because they don't know if I maybe speak out, will they use it against me, for example, because I'm a student or because I work here? Are they going to maybe make me lose my job? So these are some of the realities that are on ground. But yeah, it goes without saying that such things do happen.
Kathy and Shiv, do you want to say anything on this?
Yeah, it's a common knowledge. We all know this happens, and we are trying to make a change. Again, you can make a law, but unless it happens on the ground level, it's not going to change. And the only way it is going to change, I mean, I work with race equality, and I find that, as Clive said about the travelers, I 100% agree with him. That is the situation. But on the other hand, for some reason, they are not approachable. They don't want to mix with the society at the same time. They're too scared. I have tried to approach many times on different issues, but you cannot just walk into their place and talk to somebody. That's a very difficult situation. Same with the Black minority. We are trying to raise the profile. We are trying to do a lot of things, but unless somebody comes forward, we can't do anything about it. The whole thing is, everybody has to make an effort. By me putting my arms out, not going to make any difference unless there's somebody else there to join me. So we must get together, talk to each other, try to understand each other. That's the only way forward. Because if we are saying, oh, well, that's Black, I don't really want to talk. I don't know what he's going to say. Or this is Indian, I don't want to do that. We have to come to the common place, common ground, where we can have a conversation, interaction. Unless we have an interaction, that barrier cannot go down. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Kathy, did you want to?
No, just one brief comment around the BAME label. I just think it's worth noting that it is such a, as Clive said, such a clumsy label. It's very problematic on many different levels. But I think any label that tries to categorize a whole group of people will be problematic. And even within the Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, etc. groups, we haven't come up with a better label for ourselves. So it's the one we've got at the moment. It is problematic, but I think we need to acknowledge that it is a problematic label, even though it does glean some statistics for us, for example, with COVID, with vaccines and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I know a lot of my white colleagues who ask me, as Bishop's advisor on racial justice, so what label, how do you guys want to be self-identify? And we've had conversations and we just can't work out what would work because of the breadth of diversity within our Black, Asian, minority ethnic group in the diocese. Yeah.
Sorry, Ambrose, if I could just say, potentially you're going to end up with the LGBTQ plus answer as well. It is awfully difficult when you get a group of people with who feel that there's some kind of commonality of experience, but of course they're a very diverse group. And every time you try and simplify that, you're somehow denying the specificities of the subgroups. But if you try and list all the subgroups, you end up with the, you know, the alphabet soup, which LGBTQ plus groups now have, and it becomes, after a while, probably unwieldy. But again, you know, a Jews part of BME, we're definitely a minority ethnic community, but we're not understood to be that. So does that mean we're only talking about really people of colour? Is that really what BME means? In which case, why have we got the ME bit or what are we doing now? And I think we perhaps just have to accept that the term has just become an accepted way of getting on with it. What's much more important is trying to create some justice in the process rather than worrying about the label.
And we go back to you. Do you have another question for us?
Yes, I do. Very quickly, just to say, with BME and BAME in the quality sector, so still very much within a group of people who talk to each other in circles sometimes. One thing that has risen to the surface is the phrase minoritized communities. And this takes an element of came from disability rights and the social model of disability. So it's the idea that minority groups are such because of what wider society, the majority, does and how they position them and treat them. So you have been minoritized. It's something that has been actively done to you rather than something that you are. And so that I find quite an interesting concept that is beginning to rise up as people do struggle, exactly as Clive said, with this kind of like, how do you keep adding more elements to something that actually makes sense? There's also been quite a lot of research that when you talk to the general public, most of them have no idea what BME or BAME stands for. So it's also a question of who are we talking to? Are we just talking to ourselves? And how do we find language that resonates and connects with the wider public? But anyway, enough of
Sorry, can I just say that the best example of a minoritized group is women, who are, of course, in the majority, but their experience is that, as it were, of a minoritized group that is being treated as less than the dominant group.
Yeah, absolutely. But on to the next question. So we've got one from Graham Davey, and I think it sort of leads on, and the panel have touched on this already. But Graham asks, what more could national and local government do to reduce and eventually eliminate racism? A big task there.
Who wants to start? Yes, Clive.
So just coming quickly, really in a sense, picking up something that Shiv said before. Shiv said that, it doesn't matter how many laws you make, it's not going to make any difference until people change. And I don't disagree with him at all, but we shouldn't forget the effect that laws can have. In the 1960s, it was commonplace to see signs up saying no dogs, Irish or blacks. And nobody thought that was even a controversial thing. Oh, not nobody. Lots of people didn't think that was a controversial thing to put up outside things. And then the Race Equality Act came in, and suddenly you just couldn't say it. It was illegal. You'd get into trouble. And those notices stopped appearing. And I do think that started to moderate people's behavior. They might not have changed their minds, but they did change their behavior. Once behavior starts to shift, then attitudes also shift to some extent. So I do think that there are laws that could be made. Right off the top of my head, I can't propose which particular laws. And I think we've moved still further. Look at that race equality legislation in the 1960s. It looks awfully primitive and limited. So I do think that there are things could probably be done.
Can I?
Yes, please.
So talking about what can be done, for example, in terms of laws, just like Clive rightly pointed out. Yes, the laws are formulated, they are put in place and implemented, okay? But I think it is important that once they are implemented, after a certain period, I think at different levels, governments, for example, local and national, should be able to reach out to some of these affected groups, get some feedback in terms of the implementation. Is it working? To what extent is it making maybe lives better, for example, in terms of how people are being racialized, and if not, why, So feedback is really important. It goes beyond, maybe laws being put in place and they will set up committees, to look into these things. No, I think feedback, if you really want to know if something is working or not, you go back to the affected communities, engage with them at different levels, hear what they have to say, you know, then you go back, you know, and also share, look at what you formulated and see to what extent were you able to achieve what you intended to, you know, to achieve. So I think there's a lot that can be done. One thing is to put it to implement, but the impact is really important. And by impact, I mean positive impact, you know, something that will lead to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wants to? Yes, yes, Shiv.
Things are changing. I'm here in this country over 45 years. Things have changed. Things are changing. It's changing slowly. The laws are helping it to change. Now, every place or every organization are doing something. They're all looking for feedback. Feedback is coming, but we can't change the whole thing in a short period. What happened in centuries, it's going to take at least 10, 15, 20 years. We have been trying to change the diesel car to electric. It's every time you look, it was supposed to be 2020, then it became 2025, now it's 2030. It's extending, but it's changing all the time. We are expecting a big change because a lot of things have happened so fast. But then last year, things just came to the head. Then everybody thought, well, actually, this needs to be changed. It is changing. We expect the government to change everything, but government can only make laws. We have to change. Unless we don't change, nothing will change. So we must make an extra effort. We must try to get connected to the community, listen to each other, try to understand each other. That's the only way. Thank you.
Was there anyone else who wanted to speak to that question? So if there are no other comments, I think, or do you have another question or do we stop here?
We've got one, well, it's two questions, but they're asking kind of the same thing. It could be something that the panel might just each give a brief thought or response to. The first one was from Katie, which says, what are we going to do next? Otherwise, this has been a good chat. We need to avoid replicating what is already occurring due to our mutual exhaustion. And in a similar vein, Lauren asked, what can we as individuals do on a personal basis, day to day, to tackle this issue? So,
yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Who wants to start?
What's next is this is next. This is what needs to be. We need to get connected. We need to come together. We need to talk to each other, find a common way, find an easier way to tackle this. Unless we do that, if we are sitting back and say, well, somebody will change it, nobody's going to come and change it. We have to change it. That is the next step. We meet again and again and again and again, talk more, try to understand more. Things will happen. We have to make the change.
There's a lot that's going on the ground already, a lot of good stuff and examples of people working well together and communities coming alongside and, you know, shoulders to shoulder. I love that expression, and coming alongside each other. And I think it's really about us making the effort to tap into what's already going on so that we don't replicate projects and ideas, but also thinking about new ways of connecting and new ways of building community and new ways of expressing the love of Christ or the love of Jesus or the love of the divine. And I just think there's so much good stuff happening there, and also challenging the status quo of negativity that's out there. So for example, in our communities, promoting the good news stories, showcasing all the positive stuff that's happening, where faith communities or all communities are coming together and doing incredible things in Bristol and beyond.
Yeah, if anyone wants to say anything, you unmute you.
I think following this conversation, first of all, I'm assuming that most of the people who chose to plug into this are people who care about these issues. They wouldn't be here otherwise. And so I'm assuming too that most of the people in on this conversation are already doing stuff, good stuff, I hope. So I don't want to diminish that or assume it's not there, because it is there. And as Kathy rightly says, there's a lot of good stuff going on, and far more good people than bad out there. We're very lucky at that. However, I think it would be nice after this conversation if people want to know what to do next. First of all, to conduct a kind of private personal audit. You know, do I actually know anybody who's a bit different to me? You know, we do tend to kind of spin in circles, especially people in the majority community, spin in circles which don't have other folk different from them in their immediate circle. So do I know anybody who's different from me? It's sufficient to talk to. I don't mean I've got a work colleague who, you know, sits at another desk, or in the old days, do you remember that? You know, or something like that. But is there somebody I know to talk to? And if there is somebody, but I don't talk to them, how do I engage in a more meaningful conversation with them to find out what their lives are like and how the world is? And one part of that might be to share this conversation. I was in an interesting call yesterday, and maybe some part of what's been said by one of us has been challenging or encouraging or whatever. You might say to your colleague, you know, in this call, what we call Zainab, or a chap called Shiv, said so-and-so, you know, what do you think of that? Is that how it is for you? Do you experience that? Is that right? Whatever. You can have those conversations with your family. You know, I don't know if this helps, but this is what I heard yesterday. So a personal audit and some personal conversation, I think, would be good. And the other thing, of course, is to resolve, and this is really, really difficult, to resolve, to challenge the crap when you hear it, right? And that's whether somebody makes a racist joke or says something which is just stupid, right? And actually say, I don't think that makes any sense. How can you say that? Where's this come from? I would strongly recommend that people don't devote their entire lives to challenging stuff on the internet, because that way madness lies. But if you're in some particular group and you hear that kind of stuff, then by all means challenge it. I mean, there is an awful lot of rubbish out there, and you can drive yourself crazy trying to chase it down, and probably just invite on yourself a pile up, a pile in, should I say. But certainly to challenge stuff, I think, is another good way, because besides anything else, that also heightens our own consciousness. We become more aware of what's acceptable and unacceptable. So that, I think, makes us more useful engines in this whole process.
And finally, Zainab.
Yes, for me, I believe to all of us, really, this is a call to action. There's a lot being done, but so after this, what happens next? We should think about coming together again to start dialogue and, you know, build on what is on ground and see how we can take this further. And I'm happy and I'm open to being a part of, you know, to working with anyone here. Let's come together, because together we will be very strong and we'll be able to, you know, one head is better than, sorry, two heads, you know, they say are better than one, but I believe if there are 4 or 5 or 6 or even 10 heads, definitely we'll be able to come together to strategize and see how we can support each other and move forward. It shouldn't end here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So on that note, I thank our panelists for sharing with us the views. Zainab Mai-Bornu, Shiv Sama, Clive Lawton, and Catherine Okoronkwo, thank you very much. And also I thank you, the audience, for staying with us for this discussion. So without more from me, I pass you back to A.
I think you're actually coming back to me first.
Okay.
I just want to thank each and every one of you for this fascinating conversation, a really deep conversation, and such an important conversation. It's really important to keep it going. And I really hope that each of us who are listening and participating will find a way of doing that. One thing that we are going to offer to people after this discussion is the opportunity to come together in a workshop, which will be led by Ambrose and Kathy. It's called Words of Protest, Words of Witness, and it's looking at ways that we can use poetry and prose and the writing of letters to explore the relationship between writing and protest. So that might be something that you might like to join us with. It's going to be at the Harbourside Pavilion in Bristol. The date is yet to be confirmed, but it will definitely be before the end of next month. So we will let you all know when that will be, and we would love you to join us. It is limited in terms of place. There are 25 places, but it would be fantastic to get people from different faith communities and from no faith at all to come together and to explore what we can do through writing as well. But overriding in all of this is the need to come together and keep this conversation going. So thank you for being part of this conversation this evening. And thank you to all of those who have joined us. Over to you.
And so just to say again, thank you on behalf of the Voice and Influence Partnership to our brilliant BSL interpreters, Ambrose, our host, and our panel members, and also to you, our wonderful audience. If none of you had turned up, we would have literally been talking to ourselves. So it's been wonderful to see so many people come and join us tonight. We'll be posting the recording of this panel discussion on the Care Forum's YouTube page as soon as possible. And again, we'll send out links to all our usual emails and so on. And we'll put something on the Down Centre website as well to let you know when that's available. And yes, it would be brilliant, as the panelists said, you know, one of the things that can then be done is this conversation can be shared with people you know, and those who weren't able to be here tonight, so that it can be the start of a conversation, not one that just sort of happened on a Thursday evening and ended. Yes, so I really look forward to being part of what comes next, and thank you everyone for being with us. I think that's the end. We're going to hang on for a bit, but audience members, do feel free to head off for a well-deserved cup of tea this evening.